How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. This is the Underground Leadership Movement, and this is going to be a very special episode. I'm very excited about it, and personally, couldn't come at a better time for me. I'm going to need to hear a lot of what these guys have to say. But without anything further, I've assembled quite. I feel like I've almost assembled the fire service version of the Avengers here today. But with me, I've got Mr. Mark Van Oppen, Mr. Jared Sergi, and Mr. Mark Alone. So how are all of y'all doing today?
Outstanding.
All right.
Well,
It's gonna be a little awkward because like I said before we started recording, I've never done one with four people. So everybody's gonna be trying to be polite and not jump onto everybody, but then just like there's gonna be awkward pauses. So we'll make it work. But like I said, I'm very excited to have these guys. Two of them I've talked to some to quite a bit, and Mr. Von Oppen here I've just met recently, so excited to dig in and learn from them. But what we're going to talk about today, I feel like a lot of people need to hear it, and a lot of people are going to want to hear it. But basically, just to sum it up, the best I can is frustration, and will we let that begin or be the beginning of the end, or we allow it to be just the beginning for us? And I stumbled all the way through that, but to just tie a personal note to it real quick, and I'll get to these guys. A lot of what I'm doing, a lot of where I have been taken over this little journey I've been on the past couple of years came from frustration for me. And I know that I've heard the same thing from these three guys as well and other podcasts and things like that. And so that being said, we all face a lot of frustration. Fire service, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you're going to face some frustrations because that's just the nature of what we do. Are we going to allow that to fuel passion and the pushing of our message to more people, or are we going to allow it to fuel the anger and resentment and just kind of let that tear us apart? And that's kind of where we're going to go with it. So before we get into it, Mark Von Oppen, you can give a little quick synopsis of who you are, where you're from, for those who haven't met you, heard you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for getting us all together today. This is going to be fun. I'm excited about it. Yeah, I'm just like we were kind of talking in the prologue before we got started, before we came on. I'm just a fire captain from Northern California who's trying to figure it out like everybody else. And it's interesting that you bring up the subject of frustration, because that's kind of how this whole thing started with Fully Involved, and everything it came about because of frustration. But in terms of who I am and who I try to be in the fire service, I've always been tried to be somebody who gives back. Been involved in a lot of different things here in this area in California. That's where I'm from, and just involved with teaching and just trying to develop the next generation of firefighters, trying to help out and do my part and pass on what's good about the job. So it's kind of me.
Awesome. Jared Sergi.
Good morning, everybody. I'm also captain. I'm over in Norfolk, Virginia, out on the East Coast. I've been with Norfolk for about 17 years, and I'm excited about talking about the frustration stuff. I too have had frustrations, and I also have not channeled it correctly at times, and I've learned the hard way. So hopefully I can share some of my experiences and some of my pitfalls with all of you to hopefully make you more successful.
Awesome. And Mark number two.
Mark number two, the other Mark, right? So, yeah, Mark Alone, captain as well. I work for West Columbia in South Carolina, one station department. Like these guys have said, I think if you're passionate at all about the fire service, frustration has been somewhere in your background, and fortunate enough to just be able to take some of that frustration and turn it into motivation for others. And Jared was a big part of that, and kind of opened me up to how we're all linked together in this battle to kind of save the fire service from itself sometimes. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. So that kind of getting that out of the way, man, I'm trying to think through some of these topics, because I'm early in a speaking career, if you want to call it that, kind of getting into some speaking stuff, and And one of the classes that I've come up with is basically just getting outside of your organization and having a true impact on the fire service outside of those firehouse walls. And part of that is this, is the frustration that you're going to feel if you are somebody that is going to want to do good things, you're wanting to make the fire service better, then you're going to hit some walls and you're going to feel this stuff. So the key is figuring out what to do with it. And that was a kind of a turning point for me, is I found myself in a spot where I was going to get myself in trouble real quick if I didn't find something to do with it. So to be honest, Mark Alone, you were probably one of the first people I kind of found and keyed into on, your writings and things like that. And so we'll kind of start with you. Do you have any, anything that you're willing to share as far as, you said you had that too, kind of where that frustration first came around, not necessarily specifics, but how you felt and what caused you to start steering that in the right direction, luckily?
Yeah, I think for me, as I've kind of, I guess, matured and learned things, what I can trace it back to now is more, I think my expectations of the fire service maybe did not fit what the fire service was. I had more of a romance with it, and didn't really understand, I guess, the fire service, the big picture of the fire service. And so you combine that with maybe being around people who treated it more as a job than anything else, or, cared about what they cared about, maybe not necessarily the same things I did. And it's just kind of a recipe for frustration. And so I've always been that person on the fire department, whether I knew what the hell I was doing or not. Like, I always tried to do something positive, right? And there's obviously been a lot of failures along with the successes there of kind of, I guess, treading out of bounds, for lack of a better term. Getting into projects and things with the equipment that roads you probably shouldn't have gone down, right? And so I think, unfortunately, when you're passionate and you're inexperienced, you kind of draw that negative attention because you're coloring outside the lines, right? And you're trying to get reeled in. But I kind of took that frustration as I went on with my career and tried to learn from it and grow from it. And then, once I did kind of mature a little, have a little more experience, a little more perspective on things, my quest has always been not necessarily to, have my own brand or be the best or anything like that. It was more of take the things that I didn't like that were done to me and try to not to repeat them for others. And I tell everybody that I talk to, I'm no great leader. I'm no great fireman. I'm just a person that decided long ago that I didn't want to be like the people that made me feel bad about the fire service. And I'm all I've learned about being a company officer to leader in the fire service is literally, I've learned more from that than I've ever learned from formalized classes or education. And so I think for me, that's all it was just trying to leave it better than I found it in a way, but also not turn off people, early in their career the way I was almost turned off by people who didn't get me.
Yeah, absolutely. Other Mark, what you got? Anything that you were willing to share? Kind of the same, early on, where you were, the decisions that had to be made to do it right.
Well, I think Mark touched on a lot of things that I think we're all going to echo. There's going to be a recurring theme of as we work through this frustration thing that we all wanted to do something and share and make things better where we were. And I always kind of go back to that saying that firefighters hate two things: change and the way that things are. And we got to remember that when we come in and we try to implement some sort of change, that there are people that were, that did a lot of work, sometimes unbeknownst to us, to get to where we are today. And then sometimes when we're young and we're excited and we go out and we learn things, we think that that's the only way to do things. And we come in and we say, hey, everything we're doing right now is crap. I did that. Which was the wrong approach. And I think that, you go out and learn and want to share, and you're continually thwarted in your efforts to bring, what you've learned to love about the fire service back to your organization. As a new person, that's when you can get pretty frustrated. And that's where you got to find a way to, channel that energy in the right direction. I had a number of years ago, I was sitting in a room with a bunch of people that I absolutely did not belong in the room with. And, one of them was Alan Brunacini. and I was just listening to him talk, and another guy in the room, and I can't remember his name, said a big revelation for him in letting go of it. It's funny because I think the conversation, like part of the conversation, went down the road of frustration, and part of, you know, what was a big eye opener to me, the big revelation was, one of the firefighters in the room said, I was able to let go of a lot of negativity and a lot of anger when I figured out that the world didn't need me to fix it, you know, and you know, if we find a way to channel our message in the right direction to affect the greatest number of people, and not get so emotional about it, remove the emotion from it, and be a little bit more patient. That's one of the things that I've learned is that you know, when we have that negativity and when we don't speak to people in the right way, and you know, we let that, you know, our passion turn to frustration and anger, that's when we're going to alienate a lot of people. So it was trying to, you know, maturing and figuring out that even if, you know, what we were doing or what I was trying to bring back to my organization, even if it never happened, we were going to be okay. I mean, somehow the fire service kind of seems to stumble along and do okay. It seems like without a tremendous amount of intervention sometimes. So, you know, letting go of some of it and not trying to make the world conform to the way that I thought it needed to be was a big thing for me. So anyway, but we just got to remember that there are people who did a lot of work before we came in there. And when we come in and want to change the world, there are people who are invested in the past and kind of like the way that things are. And we have to be, you know, sensitive to that. And find a way to say, okay, what we did was good for the time or whatever it is, and this is what's current and new, and this is going to make your life easier. So,
yeah. Jared, you have anything you can share?
Yeah. I was totally guilty of a lot of the stuff that Mark talked about. And for me, kind of like both of them, I can remember being part of a crew, and I almost had this expectation that everybody should be like us. Like we had a good officer, at least in my mind, and we had a good crew. And I had this problem, I guess you can call it, in my mind, that I just believe that everybody should think like me, and that everybody should think like us, and everybody should have this same level of passion for the fire department, the fire service that we did. And that if they didn't, then something was wrong with them, you know, and I, instead of being the guy that would go out of my way to try to help them, it was just more of a, well, like, you don't even belong here. Why are you even taking up time in a position in our fire department and the fire service? So it was just a totally, you know, skewed way of seeing things. And just, it just didn't work out well for me. And like Mark talked about with the change stuff, I was that person. Like, I can remember working on projects or something, and you know, just like I am now, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, people did those same things that I did, and they were trying to benefit the department. And whether I agree with it or not, it was time they invested into a project. It was research that they did. They were close to it. They were passionate about it. They had an emotional connection to it. And then here I come, or somebody else comes, but me in particular, you know, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and my approach was off. It was more of a, well, this is wrong, I don't know why we're doing this, instead of trying to help the people who initially worked on that stuff, like try to help them better understand like my approach. Like, hey, this is why I'm doing this. I'm not here to say that what you did was wrong. I'm here to say that maybe we can revisit some things and look at some things and maybe build upon what you initially created. I didn't do any of that stuff. I totally went about it the wrong way. And it was more like I just dropped Thor's hammer. It was like, no, you guys are wrong here. And it didn't help me. It, like, if anything, it hurt me, because those people are like, well, I'm not going to help Jared out. Like, he's asking me for support, but yet he's totally going about this the wrong way. I've basically walked up to them and told them that everything that they've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20 years is wrong. And I have a better way. So, you know, even if you think that might be true, it's all in the approach. You know, I can remember somebody coming up and telling me that, like, Jared, like, you have good things here, and these people that you're working on things with have good ideas, but you're screwing it up with your approach and your total attitude about it. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. And I try to remember that now. And, you know, in 10, 15, 20 years, that could be me, you know, the older guy. And I have a younger firefighter or an officer coming up and saying, I want to change something that I worked on, you know, and I have to be mindful enough to know that, like, it's nothing personal, you know. Hopefully they're just coming in to try to improve the department, and I need to be careful about how emotionally attached I get to it, and let them, you know, let that dog hunt, let them, empower them to change it. Because I'm sure it will be better than what I did, you know, in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, kind of one of the echoing themes of all three of you guys is, and it's funny, you know, I've thought about this several times, is I've been in cycles of my career, and I'm sure, you know, probably all of you could say the same thing. I've been the kind of checked out guy. I've been the person that has been so worn out from my home life that when I went to work, I didn't have much to give. I was there basically a body in a seat, and you know, I didn't enjoy those times. But now that I'm kind of on the other side of that, and you know, I am passionate about this stuff, and I do want to get better and train and things, I've never had more fun than I am right now. And I think that's a message that needs to be shared as well, because we can make this job so much even better than it already is if we just invest in it, just like anything else. But another part of that is, it's interesting that when you are that checked out person, it's just, you know, it is what it is. Nothing is, you know, I don't know. The water's just kind of settled. But now that I'm passionate, now that I want to do more and learn and grow, all of this frustration is like overwhelming, because I want to do better and I want to be a part of something better. And I think back to those days when it's like nobody cared about it. It's like nothing bothered us. But now that you're wanting to do better, it's almost like a kind of a compounding effect. The more you want to do, the harder it is to kind of overcome when you can't, or when you're hitting those obstacles. And so kind of one of the things that I wouldn't be here without it, and I know you guys are heavily involved in it as well, is getting outside, networking, and gaining a support system, and, you know, these outside conferences or classes and things like that. So, you know, any one of you just kind of talk about what that has been a part of your story, if anybody has anything want to share about that.
Yeah, I'll jump in, because what you're talking about kind of saved me in a lot of ways in my career, to where, you know, that was kind of, you know, what righted the ship for me was going out. The High Rise Operations Conference, I think, was the first training I ever went to outside of like State Fire Academy type stuff. Like I had no idea that was even out there. I didn't know it was a thing. I knew what FDIC was. I knew what, you know, Firehouse Expo was, but I thought those were things that chiefs went to, or, you know, the company officers, that there was no way that a guy with 5 or 6 years on could ever go participate in that stuff. So I think it's very validating in a lot of ways to go out and talk to other people and do things. If you're ate up with things, or even if you're not, even if you just enjoy firefighting, it's cool to go somewhere and see this level of humility people have to do these skills and sit in these classes with people that, you know, they may not agree with you, but they're not going to tear you down for having a different opinion, right? They're going to talk about it. You know, you're going to break bread with these people. You're going to share some drinks and have all these conversations. I will say on the flip side, though, you know, there's always negatives with the positives, is that it is kind of addicting, but it can also, if you don't meter it correctly, you can kind of feel your frustration, because now when you start going constantly throughout the year, you're out with like-minded people, you start to tailor yourself to those views. And when you come back, if your department doesn't share those views, now it's, well, you know, why aren't we like Jared in Norfolk, right? You know, why don't we do stuff like they do it? You know, I just listened to him for 4 hours and we suck, you know, kind of what he said. And so I think you have to be careful with it. And you have to have a maturity to yourself to be able to go out, take that message, and then tailor it back to your department, kind of like skills, right? You know, what works for New York City may not work for me at one station, but there is value in those tactics, but I do have to adapt them to my resources, my personnel, my city, for them to work. It's not, you know, you can't just take it how it is all the time without doing anything. So that's kind of how I feel about that. I don't know anybody though that's really gone out to those bigger things and come back with, some negative impact on their department. Like they went and learned things and made their department worse. I don't think that happens.
Absolutely. Either the other two.
Yeah.
Jared, do you want to go or I can go?
Yeah, man. I was just going to say, again, I've been there. You go to these conferences. It doesn't matter what type of training, you come back and you have these ideas. I come back, I got a page full of notes and it's like, hey, Chief, you got a couple minutes? The first thing you have to do is just be realistic, and I'm not saying to give up on stuff. I'm not saying to just draw line items through everything you were going to bring back. I'm not saying that at all. But just, your departments, the people that are in charge of your departments, the people that work with you. I would say, find a few things that you really want to tackle. And like, these are the hills that I'm willing to die on. Like if these things don't happen within the next 1 to 5 years, then that might be okay. Or maybe I could revisit them. But these 1 or 2 things, like these are the things I'm really passionate about. These are the things that I want to do for my department and the people in it. And then again, approach it the right way. I think I guess it all depends on the person. It all depends on your bosses, of course. But if you go back, I know for me, going back to a particular cadre of leadership that was in my department at the time, if I came back with a list of stuff and I told them this is what I want to do, they would immediately shut down. And that's just how they were. And I had to understand that about them. So if you have those chief officers that will take that whole list, rip it off, post it on their wall, and it's like, all right, let's start divvying this stuff up. That's awesome. But again, it goes back to understanding your department. It goes back to understanding your leadership. Maybe just grab 1 or 2 things and then you might have to play the long game on some of those. Sometimes you might have to wait people out. I had somebody tell me the fire service is evolutionary, not revolutionary. And sometimes you just got to wait. I know. And that might not be the answer anybody wants. It's not the answer that I want, but it's something that I've learned that I've had to do, at least for me.
Yeah. How about you, Mark?
I think we're all kind of echoing the same sentiments. And as I listen to people tell their stories, I think the thing that helps you work through some of this stuff when you go out there and you go to those conferences is you realize that you're not alone. You realize that as you talk to people and even, what we're talking about today, when this airs, it's going to show people that they're not alone, that their frustrations are not unique. And I think when we go to those things, we get so excited that we want to come back and we do want to change the world and we want to change things immediately. And like Jared said, the fire service is evolutionary, not revolutionary. So it takes a long time to get these things, implemented. And one of the things that I've come to realize is, our job, the further that we go along, is to, recognize that there are people that bring value to the organization that we may not see, and they're, like I keep saying, and we've all said, there are people that did a lot of work to get us to where we are today, to get us the good reputation that the fire service has. So, we have to recognize people for that stuff. And then again, just, just find whatever you're passionate about. And if you don't achieve success, like if you run into brick walls, our job as we go further along in our career is to support those people that may come along after, our voice ran out on a certain issue. And then they've got the traction and they've got the microphone and people are listening to them. And if we're in a position of leadership or influence, help those people move that idea along and not just fold our arms in frustration and say, hey kid, I wasn't successful doing that 20 years ago. We couldn't get those things implemented. So, up yours, good luck. Our job is to help move the ball forward and help people in ways that maybe we didn't receive, that help, back in the day.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool idea. As you're saying that, I just have a kind of an image in my head of, you got relay races, but if you kind of picture it on just a straight line, you're trying to get to a goal. Maybe you can't get there, but you got that baton as far as you can. And the best thing you can do now is hand it to somebody else that's got some momentum, that's got some talent, that's got the mission and passion to take it even further. And that's an awesome thought of, I guess, just kind of you verbalizing it in that way, putting it in that picture, it kind of really makes that pop to me. So I like that visual for sure.
Well, it kind of goes back. It kind of goes back to the whole notion that the world doesn't need you to fix it.
Yeah.
It doesn't begin and end with you. It's a team sport. And, when we get tired, and you talked about it, a little bit ago, where your career has those ebbs and flows, where you're redlining it for, a couple of years or something like that. And then something changes with you and you got to dial it back a little bit. It doesn't mean that any of that knowledge or any of that passion went away. That's still in there, and you're still going to perform at a high level, but you may not be the person that's as actively involved in everything as you once were. And we need to understand and give credit for people, for things that go on in their lives and things that happen, because the longer we go, as we work our way through our career, things absolutely change. I mean, we may get married, we may have kids, we may you buy a home. And when you're first trying to get into the fire service is your everything. But as your life starts to expand and more people come into the picture beyond just your brothers and sisters at the firehouse, and you start, spawning children, it's kind of an important thing to pay attention to them. And so there's going to be that natural, those ebbs and flows where, maybe, as you go further in your career, you may not seem as excited about it, and you may not, but, it's still there. And, it's funny too. I always like it when older crews, looking back on it now, when older crews would show up to a drill or something like that, you're like, oh, those guys are checked out and they don't, what are they going to do? And they would come out and they would just, when I was in training, we thought we set up some sort of complicated drill. The old guys would make it look like it was child's play, and they wouldn't even be moving very fast, but they have the best time of the day if we were keeping track of, company standards and how long, it took for them to do stuff. And it's like, you just go, and that's why I keep saying that there are people that have done things before us, and we have to give credit for the value that they bring to the organization and the history that they had in the organization. And sometimes we have to sit down and talk to them and say, hey, what's up? And then you really realize that, hey, they were the same passionate person that you are now, and they ran into enough brick walls that they started to slow down a little bit. They got too many concussions and they had to kind of, chill out. So, I would just encourage people to sit, some of the best conversations I had and some of the best things that I learned in the fire service were when, people were getting ready to retire, and they would come through my station, and we would just sit and talk for hours and hours and hours. And I learned about how to treat people, and I learned about how to work through frustration. And I learned about, leadership and a lot of things, that I didn't even realize were happening. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think kind of what you just described right there to me is the key from having frustration. So that's where we're at. Having that frustration, either it going in a good direction or bad direction. And what that key is from what you're saying, and something big to me, is humility. Do you have the humility to take that frustration and say, okay, there are some legitimate things with this that I can do something with, but there are also some things that I'm just kind of, I probably should let go a little bit. I'm being a little bit too much on. And so coupling that humility with the frustration, I think, is going to really steer us in a good direction. I think, Jared, you kind of hit on a few things kind of in that area earlier. Is that kind of what you were touching on a little bit?
Yes, I had zero humility with some of the stuff that I was working on when I was younger, if I'm being totally honest. I just didn't. And again, it was, I had the frustration like a lot of people. It was stemmed from probably a lot of the same things that you and the people watching have. I wasn't able to channel it the right way until I had a couple people like knock me on the head, like, look, idiot, like you're going about this the wrong way. Like, we want you to be successful and we'll help you get there, but you gotta change your path a little bit. And, one thing that I had, one of my mentors told me is to assume positive intent in people. And like, if I bring something to the table to my chiefs, my officers, like, don't just assume that they're going to squash it just for the sake of, because that's just what they want to do. Like, they just go to work and try to make your lives miserable every day, that they're not up there doing that. Now, are there anomalies that jump in those ranks? I'm sure there are. I'm not a naive person either, but assume positive intent in people. And I think that will that will help with your humility. I think that will help with your approach, and it'll help with you not just going in there assuming, oh, well, let me just go bring this to them. I know they're gonna destroy it anyway. But if you choose the right approach and you assume that positive intent, it'll be beneficial. Because if you don't, that frustration spills over to other things, like little things, like conversations with other chiefs that maybe not even be involved, conversation with other people. It may spill over into a tone of an email. Like it's funny how that frustration could just totally eat at us. And it's like, it just spills over into other little things that we do. And I know, because I've been guilty of it, so you got to be careful about it.
I just love the fact that, like, I think all of us on this call right now have pretty much done all the same things. You know what I mean? It's like we fired off an email before we thought about it. When we should have put it in we should have written a letter and put it in the drawer and got it out, like Abe Lincoln says, or, just it's crazy. But yeah, humility is the huge thing. And I think that humility sometimes comes with maturity. I think when we're young and fired up and everything, and we've got, we're just, ate up for the fire service. I think that humility and humility sometimes takes a backseat to bravado and being right, and, doing the right thing and being right or different. And I think that sometimes we're so concerned with being right that we sometimes don't do right, and we don't treat people right. And I know that I was guilty of that. I know that I was guilty of probably saying some things to some people and acting a fool some ways under the guise that I was trying to make us better. And I think that sometimes, again, it's all about the approach. It's all about being humble and vulnerable and saying, hey, I don't know everything, and I don't do everything right, but here's what I've learned, and let's share this together. And I think that goes back to, like what Mark was saying about, go to those conferences. You really understand that there's an entire world out there with people that dive so deeply into subject matter that you haven't even thought about. And it's super exciting. And then you go sit down with them and have a beer with them after their class. And like, oh, this guy's pretty cool, or whatever it is, and they're just a normal person who's just excited about what they do. And that becomes contagious. So,
yeah. Alon, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the humility to me, I think, changes too throughout your career, right? So when you're younger, humility is understanding that there are other ways and things and people out there, right? And then as you kind of advance in your career, especially I think everybody here would get it as a company officer, right? Like my job with humility as a company officer is to not be afraid to fail in front of my people, right? To kind of open the door for them, maybe ease some of those frustrations by knowing that, like, oh, well, Cat botched that hose stretch and training today, right? Maybe I don't feel as bad about it. But I think too, you have to be careful with the humility, especially as you move up, because I think you can become too humble and get run over. And I think we're in a passive aggressive society right now. And maybe the people who need humility in our departments aren't always the people that have it. And then the ones that maybe should be a little more assertive are kind of holding back, because they're following the leadership education and the advice of leaders of, making sure they're being humble and treating everybody, equally. And you can almost be, like I said, too passive aggressive, in your ventures. And then next thing you know, the people that are making the changes in your organization are not the right people for the organization, right? Because those who should have spoke up just kind of, oh, well, I don't want to start conflict and I don't want to be that guy. And they're going to think I'm arrogant and I have an ego. But something I've been pondering lately, and not to get us too far off course, is just, my whole career has been, majority rules. And what I've kind of learned at later stages of my career is that the majority is not always correct. And so at what point does the correct idea rule, the correct concept rule versus, if you have 25 people that want to go to some horrible hose load or horrible arrangement on the engine that doesn't work for your district, but there's one or two people speaking up about it. When does what's right trump what's popular, and that's kind of, like I said, I don't want to take us too far off course, but I think that fits in with the humility, right? Of when do you stand up for what's right and what you believe in versus when do you kind of pass the torch on?
Yeah. And
I think too,
go ahead. Go
well,
ahead.
Mark, I agree. And I think what I'm hearing from you too, though, when I listen to you talk about that, is humility has to be something that's pervasive throughout the organization, right? We have to be humble enough when we get to those leadership spots to say, okay, this person, the way that maybe they're approaching it, maybe they need to tone down their approach, but their message is the right message. Yes, this is the direction we need to go in. And I'm sure we've all heard it here. It's not the message, it's the messenger, right? And am I wrong? We've all heard it, correct? I mean, nod your head, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that hearing that sucks, but management, leadership, whatever it is, as we go up in the organization, again, we have to find value in what the message is and be humble enough to take personalities out of it and do what's best for the organization. I think what you're speaking to, it becomes a personality contest, and people get pissed because they don't like Mark Alone, or they don't like Jared Sergi, or they don't like Mark whoever it is, right? And that's the frustration. And you want to talk now? You hear my voice going up. I'm getting frustrated, right? Because again, we're not doing what's best for the team, and that's the shit that pisses me off. Okay, is when we I talk a lot about it. The people that make a difference are the ones that say what they're going to do and then they actually do it. And yes, you can be too humble. And yes, I'm sure all of us have been guilty of hitting it too hard, selling ourselves too hard, and then we dial it back, and you get into a situation where you're not selling yourself to the organization as you should, and maybe your personality has submarined you at times. I know that in my organization, and I make no bones about it, I have topped out in my organization by my own doing. I've made it so that I was lucky enough to get promoted to company officer, and I will go no higher. And it's kind of like Bull in Backdraft, where Axe pulls him off the guy when they're at the fight at the Christmas party or whatever it is. Yes. And he says, "Jesus Christ, Bull, you ever wonder why you're stuck a lieutenant for life?" And he says, "No." He's hammered, and he goes, "No."
My guys tell me that weekly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that if you own it, you say, okay, I did those things, I own it, and I think that'll also, if we're going down the frustration route, I don't know where I'm going with this, but if you own who you are, and you realize that how you show up on the daily affects other people and affects you down the road, but if you're okay with it, I think that eases some of the frustration too. You just go, okay, all right, well, you own your behaviors, you own the things that you've done, and you learn from them and you evolve. But the organization, that'll ease some of your frustration, but the organization also has to give you credit for how you evolve and how you mature as a person. I'm not the same firefighter I was 10 or 15 years ago at all. I'm not the same person. I would like to think I've matured quite a bit in the organization, and I've learned how to, use more inclusive language, try to bring people in rather than push them away, play to people's strengths rather than, pointing out their weaknesses, things like that. But I think sometimes those personality, pissing contests, run too deep, and it's hard for people to put their egos aside the higher they go in the organization and give people credit for who they've become and the value that they can add to the organization. Personal bias is playing a little bit too much, I think, and that can lead to frustration. So I guess my point with this whole thing is humility has to run from the top of the organization to the bottom and then back up. And it isn't just enough to say people in middle management positions need to be humble or firefighters need to be humble. Everybody does. Yes. And, care enough to talk to people and keep the organization running.
Yeah.
You hit two things, and hopefully, Jeremy, this brings us back around, but two things you just said, I think, kind of get overlooked in the frustration conversation are growth and you, right? Because I had a battalion chief who kind of described it to me great. He's like, everybody, we were talking about, the fireman's fire chief, right? And he's like, yeah, like you want a fire chief that understands the line, that gets the line, that's been there and done that. But, why people on social media just lose their mind for a chief that, comes out to the bay and pulls hose or whatever, like that's cool, right? But wouldn't you rather have a chief that's, in their office advancing your organization at their level because they have grown, right? There's a difference between forgetting where you came from, versus your new role. And so like you said, you're not the same firefighter you were 10 or 15 years ago. You're supposed to grow, right? And a lot of our frustration really evolves from a lack of growth. I think a lot of the time, a lack of perspective. Mark's not the same guy he was before he promoted. Well, I would hope not. He promoted, right? He has to do different things now. And then also you, right? We all said it in the beginning. my approach was off, right? My expectations were wrong. But too often when we talk frustration, it's the fire chief sucks, the fire department sucks, the city sucks, A shift sucks. It's everybody but you, and so you have to know that you have a role in your own frustration a lot of the time. It may not be a big role, but you do have a role in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's exactly where I was going to go kind of after you started talking a little bit about that earlier. Is for me, just speaking personally for me, I know that the fastest way for me to get myself into trouble, and the fastest way for me to get in a spot where I am more and more frustrated, is that when my focus becomes bigger. So I've been at my department for over 19 years. I've got a lot invested in this place. I love my department. So that being said, I have emotional attachment to it. And so when I have something that is on me that I want for us to get better, and I kind of hit resistance or whatever, it quickly builds up resistance or frustration. Sorry, it quickly builds that frustration in me because I have that tie. And so for me, I have to just constantly tell myself to focus on my crew. I'm lucky enough to be a company officer like all you three as well. It is an awesome place to be. We have the ability to make our crew and our firehouse and our environment as good as we possibly can and want to be. And it's awesome. Me, just my mindset or personality or whatever, being at this place for so long, I tend to start fading, or kind of that circle tends to keep evolving out because, look, I'm doing good with my crew. Other crews should be doing this. And so that circle starts getting bigger and bigger. And then I start, getting that resistance and getting that frustration. I got to kind of bring it right back down into where I need to be. Jared, do you ever feel anything kind of like that or deal with that?
Oh, absolutely. There's things that I see beyond the walls of my firehouse that make me want to beat my head against the wall. There's things that I wish I could reach out and have immediate control over. And a lot of times I have none. So like you, I go through these things. I rationalize in my mind, like, how can I fix it? What's my approach? What can I do? Like, here we go again. Like, what do I do with this frustration? And as an officer, I have to realize, like, one, I'm there to set an example. And then two, like, I have to consciously like knock myself back and say, look, like, I just need to focus here. Like, if I focus on my station, like, maybe there's spillover into other places. Like, the way I view it is, whatever frustrations that I have, I can, and maybe I'm a bit of a dreamer, but, maybe I can shape culture in my firehouse, and I can shape and influence future officers, and I can shape and influence future decision makers, and all these people that have ideas are going to move the organization forward. Like, I shift my focus there, and that's where I try to harness it. And usually that rights my ship. Like, usually it just takes me a day or two. When I focus on my crew, I focus on my station, I focus on the things that we need to do. I focus on our priorities. A lot of times for me, that's what fixes it. And the things that I was frustrated about, the things that I saw, the things that I wish I had control over, I'm not really concerned as much. Not that I don't care about it or anything like that, but that seems to be what works for me is just turning my eyes right back towards my company and focusing on the things that I can help with, and shaping those future firefighters that are going to do things in the department years down the road.
Yeah. And that is another kind of another bullet right here I was going to bring up here in a little bit, but what you said ties into exactly what the two Marks were saying earlier, that another thing that I kind of have to constantly tell myself is, do I have any control over this? And that's a big kind of fork in the road for me. That frustration is there. Okay, so do we have control over that? If the answer is no, then why do we allow that to take anything from us, take any energy, take any, emotion, take any kind of, positivity? We shouldn't allow that because we have no control over it. If we do, okay, then let's start veering that way and start to put some of that emotion, some of that drive, and see what we can do about it. But that's a huge question for me that I constantly have to tell myself over and over again, do I have control over any of this? Because I find myself telling myself most of the time, no. I mean, most of the things I get frustrated with, I don't have any control over. I cannot fix either way. And so I just have to work myself into being okay with it and focusing on the things I can control. And that's, man, that is a constant struggle for me. Does anybody else kind of fight that constantly?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that again, we keep, it's a recurring theme of fighting frustration is, you know, we want to change things right now. And I think that, you know, realizing that the position that you're in, you're influencing the future leaders in your department. You're showing people the right way. And I had to be, you know, again, like all of us, I was pissed because I wanted sweeping organizational change right now. And one of my good friends, a guy that I worked at AMR with, I was his EMT partner. He was the medic. We worked in San Jose on one of the busiest rigs in the county. He's now our training battalion chief. When we were both firefighters on the truck on the ladder company, and like, you know, trying to push and I was getting super frustrated. I articulated it, you know, like we said earlier, I said, you know, we're trying to do all these things and we suck, you know, all that stuff. And we didn't suck, you know, we were actually okay. But he actually, and he's a hard charger, and he's a guy that, you know, I mean, he's a heart attack man, where he just pushes himself too hard. And, you know, he probably would benefit from listening to us talk right now. You know, he said, hey man, take a look around, look at what we're doing, and look how far we've come in the last 10 years. And you have to pause periodically and take a look around and say, okay, we've moved the needle. You know, if it is, you know, you start with your house and you try to do the right thing in your house, and then you try to grow that circle. And then, you know, it's like, you know, throwing a pebble in a pond, that ripple effect goes out, and you never know how far those things are going to reach. And, you know, if you don't give yourself credit for moving the needle and give yourself credit for the small wins that you do get, that's when the frustration really starts to creep in. And that's when you really start to get pissed off, because if you don't give yourself credit for those small wins, the influence that you are making, the differences you are, you know, making, you know, you're always losing. And like I said, if you don't give yourself credit for the small wins you get, you're always losing. And that's I think sometimes how we as type A personalities feel in the fire service, is that, you know, we want to change it. We want to change it immediately. And then that doesn't happen. Again, the fire service is evolutionary, not revolutionary. Thank you, Jared. I'm going to steal that forever.
Steal it.
But
steal
you know, it's but it's true. And I think that, you know, in order to combat that, we have to remind each other that, you know, we are moving the needle, and we have made positive strides, and we are honoring the past and looking to the future and all that stuff. And, you know, don't beat yourself up too much. And one of the things that, a book that I read that was life-changing is Buddhism for Beginners. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about, like humility and things like that, is really contained within this book. And you know, I'm not a Buddhist or anything, but I do like looking at different ways of thinking. And you know, Buddhism is very interesting to me. And it's, you know, one of the concepts in Buddhism is the concept, I'm going to totally paraphrase, is the concept of impermanence. And it's the fact that everything is in a constant state of decay, and we want everything to be perfect. And just to make an analogy, you know, if you know, we think that, you know, buying a car or whatever it is going to make us happy, and if we make enough money and we buy this car, then that's going to make our lives better. And then, you know, you drive that car to the mall, and then some asshole opens his door and puts a door ding right in the middle of your door, and then you're like, you know, all you focus on is that door ding, and then and you know, your life and your car's ruined and all that stuff. So we just have to accept things for how they are, and again, you know, kind of dial it back and just, you know, I'm not saying it's okay to suck or anything like that, but just realize that not everybody shares our same mindset. Not everybody sees things the way that we do. And, you know, it's never going to be perfect, but it kind of is what it is. And if we're making slow, steady progress, that's still progress, you know? So anyway, check it out though. Buddhism for Beginners.
Check that
Super
out.
interesting book.
Alone, you got anything?
Yeah, I think the other thing with this too is, the things we get frustrated about often aren't worthy. Like how many of these things that we really sit and bitch about all day, every day have any operational impact whatsoever? And so when you start going down that road, you allow that to bleed over to that side of the house. But, I'll give you an example, and I'll throw myself on the bus here, right? Like I will 100% get in the weeds, pissed off over like a uniform change, right? I will be just, it's not traditional. It doesn't match up. Blah, blah, blah. I want this. I want that. We should be able to do that. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. But how many of us can go down that path? But how far down do we go knowing that the guy in the back of the rig is not proficient at insert skill here, right? But we're not upset about that. We're not frustrated about that. We're just like, oh, well, he's kind of not, there. So whatever. But damn, if we had long sleeve shirts instead of short sleeves, this place would be the best fire department on the planet. And so a lot of times it's not even what's frustrating, it's what's annoying, right? And those are the easy things. And you hear it all the time. The worst thing we do is sit in the fire station because that's where we spend all our time griping. When we're out, we're doing things together, having fun. We don't gripe it. And I'm guilty. It's real easy to get comfortable in the firehouse, especially now. Like we're having like our week and a half of winter down here in the South. So like it's real easy to say, oh, it's 45 degrees outside. We may freeze if we leave the bay. So let's turn on the heaters and bitch about the department all day, right? It's too easy. But yeah, I found myself going down that road, trying to, you don't want to alienate people, and not address their concerns, but you really have to like, is this really it's not saying you can't be upset about it. You can't have an opinion on it. You can't even, be passionate about it. But at the end of the day, what is the real actual impact and why is it affecting your mindset so poorly if it doesn't equal our service at the end of the day?
Yeah. And I actually, and it's interesting because I'm, like I said earlier, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff right now that is exactly what we're talking about. I'm trying to fight the urge to be irritated because I don't need to be irritated about some things. And I literally just this morning kind of thinking about this conversation coming, something that came across my head is, there's two motivating areas for me, at least right now, for that frustration. Is it something I'm getting frustrated about because I have a drive to do something to make a difference or do better in a certain area, and maybe that is frustrating because of something, or is it just something that I'm not agreeing with or that I don't understand? That's two completely different paths, and kind of like I went on earlier as far as, can I control it or not control it? It's kind of the same, but not really, because that one path, that's some frustration I can use to fuel my passion and use to fuel the spreading of whatever message I have. Or it's a frustration that I can use to absolutely just burn me from the inside up because of exactly what you talked about, Mark. We're not allowed to wear certain baseball caps, or, we're this or that. You can go all day long, and we all know that. And that's one thing that I try my best for our station is try to purge that negativity as best you can. I would say it is impossible to completely eliminate it. It's just, I'm pretty confident in saying that, but try to do the best you can with keeping it out to a very, very minimum, because man, that will eat up everything. But just kind of realizing where it's coming from. Where is that frustration you're feeling coming from? Is it something that we can do something with? Is it something that Jared mentioned earlier, finding the areas that you're passionate about? I think that's another key. If you have areas, just one or two that you really love, that you find yourself good or knowledgeable at, those are the things you really need to dig in and start sharing that stuff. And if that is kind of where your frustration is focused, then start using that for good. And I think once we figure out where those frustrations lie, the stuff that, that we can't control, the stuff that's negative, all that, we need to throw it away and start focusing on that good stuff and really dig in on where we can take it and who we can help with it.
Well, we do need to focus on the good stuff for sure. And if I can jump in on the uniform triviality thing, I think we would all. No, I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm not trying to minimize it. It's a legitimate frustration, and I think that in leadership, you have to be able to give ground on some issues. And issues like that are things that are easy things to give ground on. I mean, when you really look at it, it's like, how much would it improve morale within the stations if you could wear a station hat, let's say, or a station sweatshirt or something like that, where you've got maybe just the unit identifier on the front of your hat or something like that. Those are some of the things that in leadership you have to give ground so that the people feel like you're listening to them, and that they get some sort of a small win. And it's not a concession, really. I mean, you can have all kinds of parameters and stuff for people to have, to display company pride, and people will still feel like they're winning. Do you know what I mean? You can even have like pretty legitimate constraints on those things. Those are the things that I simply don't understand. We've been on that train for a while, trying to say, hey, can we wear uniform or station t-shirts? Can we wear station hats and things like that? And even as far as we can't even wear a hat that says like I'm on engine 65. We can't even wear a hat that says 65. Because they just don't feel it's appropriate. But if you think about like how much people like that, and it may make them more interested in wearing their uniform,
pride and ownership,
if they could. Right. And so I think that, that leads to frustration when people above us and, people that are riding around on rigs, taking care of people, think about that. You have to give ground on some issues that maybe you don't necessarily totally agree with, but it's something that somebody else is excited about, so that they feel heard and they feel like they're getting something that they want. I mean, because leadership and all this stuff is just, it's a total give and take. It's a two-way street, and we have to be able to, like I said, be humble enough to give some ground on things and realize that it doesn't begin and end with us. So it was interesting that Mark, you started talking about the uniform thing, because that's a big thing with us sometimes. And, we went through we had light blue shirts when I got hired, and we switched to, dark blue wool shirts, and we have long sleeves. Sorry. But it was a morale booster when we switched those things around, but we didn't get everything we wanted. We wanted white buttons. We didn't get white buttons. We wanted, no patches. We have patches and all that stuff. I mean, but it was a compromise. We got what we wanted, sort of, and the staff got what they wanted. So you just have to be willing to give ground on things. And again, it speaks back to how we keep circling back to frustration ensues when, people don't feel like they're heard, and there isn't humility that runs, from the top to the bottom of the organization and back down. We have internal customers as well that want to be heard. And when those people don't feel like they're heard, the internal customer service is a real thing.
Oh yeah.
And when we don't feel like we're heard, we're going to get pissed off, and firefighters will act out in funny ways sometimes. So
it works both ways too, right? It's the same thing at the top, right? Why are you frustrated about this? As the chief of the department, why are you frustrated? Your guys want a company hat, right? And I opened everything with the disclosure. I've never been a fire chief, so I won't speak to that. But one that I have come to know and lean on for advice is Dave LeBlanc, right? And he has, to me, the best philosophy I've ever heard as a fire chief, right? Is it financially responsible? Is it safe? And is it ethical? And if all those three things are true, why do I care as the fire chief, right? Why
exactly.
am I that far in the weeds? And I wish, I'm not trying to knock fire chiefs that don't take that approach, but for somebody that's never been there, that makes so much sense to me at the company level of where you get that compromise, right? Like, okay, if you guys want to come in here wearing some kind of off the wall tie-dye uniform shirts, like we got to draw a line somewhere, right? Like that's, I'm sure you could make a case for it. I could make a case against it, but if you want to throw a unit patch on your job shirt, how is that negative? Like what does that doesn't do anything to the customer. And like you said, if it gives me a little bit of morale in the station, we pay consultants thousands of dollars to figure out what's wrong with our organizations. And a lot of times it's something simple like the guys want to wear a damn hat. If that will get them happy and energized at work, let them wear the hat.
Well, and I love Dave LeBlanc too. And I think that, he probably had that philosophy long before the book came out. But if you've read the book, It's Your Ship, that's basically that philosophy. Have you read that book? Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's a great,
Yeah, it's
Great.
On
awesome.
my list.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. I mean, and that's basically what it's David Abershoff, right? I think, but
Yeah.
whoever the author.
Something like the Ashbrough or
Yeah,
Abershoff.
but
Yeah.
he basically met with his people and said, how can I support you? And here's and I want to, and I'm going to empower you to make decisions based upon those exact things that you said from Chief LeBlanc. Where it's is it financially responsible? Is it going to kill anybody? Is it ethical, moral, all that stuff? If it fits within those parameters, you don't need to even talk to me. It doesn't need to be run through the bridge. It doesn't need to be run through the captain. You can just make those decisions. If it might, then we need to talk about it. So, he turned morale on that ship around and in pretty short order. And so it's interesting. I mean, all that stuff's out there. It's just that, again, it gets back to having a philosophy that's people centric, and you really adhere to those values, of supporting your people. And if you do those things, the frustration level within your organization is going to go down. Where it rises is when we say one thing and we do another, and that's what a lot of us are guilty of in every organization. Hypocrisy.
Yeah. Jared, anything to add where we're at?
No, I've seen the only thing is I've seen the benefit of those little things. And, even recently, and our fire chief has kind of that same philosophy. Like, this is kind of a no brainer. Patches on the job shirts, it doesn't cost a dime. In fact, it's a win for the department. We started recently putting the patches on our trucks, like every station in our department has a patch. And so when they spec out a new rig, that patch goes on the side, each side of the vehicle. So those little things matter. And, take somebody that's frustrated, like we all have been in a firehouse, and put a patch on the side of the rig. It's amazing how those little things it might not eliminate it, but it certainly helps with the root of some of their frustration, because like Mark said, it goes back to like, is this fire chief people centered? Like, fundamentally they have to care about people. And if they aren't listening to them, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, for sure. I try to avoid some of these conversations just because, you don't want this to be kind of a negative topic, but it needs to be brought up because, I've thought the exact same thing, Von Oppen, is, this doesn't cost hardly anything. It's a win. It's an easy win to turn things around, especially if you're at a place, an organization, a crew, whatever, that needs a win. If you're kind of at a down time, if you got some morale issues, those are the times you need to be looking for something. And if there's something at your fingertips that's an easy win, man, I don't get it either. And so, that's kind of those things. And it's funny that, Mark brought it up, and then it just kind of went across that we talked about earlier, the networking, and you got to kind of watch yourself of kind of just dogpiling and the fueling everybody's fire. But at the same time, it does give me a little bit of hope and a little bit of just kind of, it helps me to deal with things, because I know I'm not the only one dealing with this stuff. My department is not the only department that fights these stupid little fights, and that you feel like nobody is listening, and on and on and on. And that is very helpful to me to kind of keep me going, because it tells me that, okay, other people are fighting it. Other people have fought it. Other people are, making it through. And so that's kind of continued to help me through some of those things, I would say.
And the network thing too, the thing I remember when I first started going to conferences, if you think your department sucks, go to a conference. Yes. Somebody's department there sucks. with the caveat is somebody has to be on the bottom. So when you're sitting there and your department is worse than everybody else's, and you're just twiddling your thumbs like, please don't ask me, But I mean, everybody's department sucks. I promise you, everybody's.
Yeah. Well, I think one of since we're getting close to where we kind of need to wrap it up, and not in any hurry or anything, but Von Oppen brought up your pebbles, you're throwing pebbles and the ripples, kind of the ripple effect. I think that's something that I would love to really bring into this, because a big piece of this conversation for me is talking to those people out there that are where we were, that are in a place to where They have a lot to give. They know that they want to do more, but they haven't experienced ways of doing that yet. And so they don't know that they can throw that pebble yet. And kind of a thought that's always occurred to me when that is brought up is, you can't really tell how far those ripples go. They could go forever. You can't tell that, but I guarantee you, I know how far they'll go if you don't throw that rock. There won't be any ripples. So that being why I say that is, you've got to take that step. You've got to get out and do whatever it is that you can, that you're here to do. And so kind of with that thought, love to get into, any kind of thoughts you got with that, helping people out that were where we were at, and just spreading what they can.
Yeah. As you were talking, go ahead, Mark.
Jared, go. No, Jared, go.
All right. As he was talking, I was trying to write some stuff down, like some tangibles that somebody can take back. Like, hey, what's the result of all this? So as I was, like, hey, what do I do? The first thing I wrote, this is no particular order, is like, find an outlet, like that could be in your own department. It could be teaching. It could be, again, it's the little things, like run a battalion in service. Like if you have a passion about engine company stuff or forcible entry or search, like, hey, chief, I have this idea. What do you think about we get the battalion together? Like maybe I can put an in-service together. Again, it's all in the approach, right? Like get some help. Like let's put this together and I can roll this out over a couple of days or a couple of weeks, whatever. I find, at least for me, I can only speak from my experience, that has helped me. Like once you're done with that, you're back to the station, you're tired, but you feel accomplished. You're like, you know what? I had an opportunity to take this passion and turn it into something to benefit my battalion, my station, whatever it might be. The other thing is, find that mentor, or really find somebody that you know of who's navigated those challenges before. Like, hey, Mark, like I know you do a lot of things for the department. How have you been successful? Can you tell me about some of the things that you may have screwed up on? And those people will share it with you, right? And hopefully the humility piece comes in, and they're going to tell you what they've messed up on. They're going to tell you what they've had successes with, and then build those relationships with your bosses. The approach and running those little in-services will help, I think. And I found in my experience that going back to that control thing, with me just trying to focus on my station and my crew and doing things the right way, I think I'm a half glass full guy, but people see that. And your bosses will see that. And I have found even at times where they may even come to you and be like, hey, Jeremy, like I have this idea, or somebody brought this idea to me. What do you think about it? Because they see what you do. They see the behavior that they model. And a lot of times, if it's good, it matches the values that they believe in and the values in the department. So if they see those things, they're more likely to approach you and ask you for your opinion and ask you for your thoughts on stuff that you maybe thought, well, man, this is outside of my control, but they're asking me because they think I have a voice and I do things the right way, and I'm passionate and I channel my passion the right way and I care. So those things, find that outlet, be able to bleed that passion into something positive instead of letting it spill over into something negative. Find that person has had those same challenges that you've had, things, people that have been working on things, and ask them questions. What made you successful? What caused you to fail? What didn't work? What did? And then build those relationships with the people that are around you, not only your peers, but your bosses as well.
Yeah. Who's next?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I would echo 100% of what Jared said in terms of that stuff. It's good to be an honest self-evaluator and see what you bring to the table. And also realize that, you got to be an active participant in your own rescue. If you're not self-reflective and you're not willing to change, you're not willing to evolve, and you keep, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again the same way, expecting different results. So, all of those things that Jared said, come up with a plan and all that stuff. And, but, for me, the biggest thing is don't quit. The fire service needs people that push and that kick and that scream. And you're going to go through a lot of fits and starts as you do these things, but keep going, don't quit, because, if you quit, you'll be left with the ache of regret of never knowing if you could have made that change. And sometimes, your brothers and sisters, just to see, they like to see the spectacle of how frustrated people get sometimes. And I know that I've been a part of that too, where people will egg you on and say, and you're just like, hey, I'm going to quit. I'm going to do this and screw that and whatever. And they're like, yeah, do it. Or, tell that person off and whatever, and speak your mind. And if you don't throw that rock in the water, you know what I mean? Sometimes we do things in a fit of passion that are intended to make a splash, but they don't shift the sands on the intended shore. Make sure that your message is true, make sure that it's people-centered, make sure that it's all those things that we talked about. Is it responsible? Is it ethical? Is it moral? All those things. And if you're doing right by your people, the splash that you make is going to shift the sands in the right direction. So.
I could unmute myself, it would help, right? Yeah, I mean, I echo everything they said. I guess just my personal take. One, have some thick skin if you're trying to make change, right? I would say that my Achilles heel of change is that, like most people, I want people to like me. I want people to agree with me. I want them to be on board. And the fact remains that the diversity of the fire service, it reminds me of when I went to basic training, right? Like I had no idea how many different walks of life, different opinions, different experiences people would have. So to expect all those people to just unanimously agree on everything is, it's a farce. It's not going to happen. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, right? It's not even that you need the majority every time. It's kind of like Jared said, build those relationships, who's influential, that kind of thing. But understand you're going to get some crossfire for it. It comes with the territory. And, if you really look at some of the movers and shakers in society, not the fire service, right? Like they were not liked for the things they did. The great leaders weren't great leaders at the time. They're great leaders later by people who, didn't have to fight them every step of the way to get where they were. So one of my favorite quotes is that, you're going to set the table for somebody else to eat a lot of the time. That's a hard pill to swallow, is that you may not experience a lot of things you're fighting for today, and people get discouraged and they stop because of that. But that's, if you're really in it for the right reason, that's not why you're doing it. On that same note, titrate to effect, right? Different people need different levels of pushing. You can't approach the guy that's going to retire next week the same way you would the guy that got on last week. It's a different effect for them. I think a big thing I failed at early in my career, and to this day I continue to do it. Maybe not as much, but make sure your changes are at your level. I think Jared touched on it earlier, right? It's really easy to come in as a guy with 2 or 3 years on and tell the fire chief everything he's doing wrong, right? You're not even there. You're not even close to being there. And yet here you are, going in there and showing them a new budget in the policy book, when what you should be worried about is, how you pull your hose and how you get your mask on and, how fast you get to the rig. So, improve yourself at your level before you start trying to chip off, on those other things. Remember a win is a win. Too many people want credit. I think Mark said this earlier, right? When you're trying to influence people and, sometimes that idea comes back around later and it's not yours anymore. It's somebody else's because somebody likes you and not me. But if you really want the change to happen, let the change happen. Don't get pissed because, oh, well, a year ago I said that, we should put the hook in the cab and you assholes didn't want it. Well, who cares? It's there now. Shut your mouth and go with it, right? Stop, interrupting your own progress. And then the last thing I'll add is keep notes. I literally have a folder on my thumb drive that says failed attempts, and things tend to come back around later on. Maybe it's not the right administration, the right company officer. Maybe it's just not the right time in your department. But you can have really good, amazing ideas that don't take hold just because the timing's off, but people just kind of throw them in the trash and they move on. So save those things. One of the things I've had advice, as you move up is that a lot of people fail when they start getting at the company officer chief level because they wait their whole career to put these changes in effect that they wanted to do when they were on, the tailboard, and it's not relevant anymore. The fire service has progressed. So, keep those ideas, but also be mindful of, whether it's still relevant or not when you get there.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things out of that I would like to make sure to echo as well is, you brought up the thick skin. Anybody that's going to stand up and speak out for something, if it's something that it doesn't matter if it's truly needed, if it's out of purest of heart, it doesn't matter what it is. anybody that stands up against something or speaks out for something, you're going to become a target. And so you need to be ready for that, and I like to say you be ready to embrace that target. That's just part of the journey. And it's a part that I kind of had to get used to, on a much smaller scale than you guys, but it doesn't take long, even somebody that's just kind of speaking up in their own organization, of having people within that organization. But the further you go out, social media or speaking or teaching, whatever, you're going to have a lot of that. And so be ready for it. And it's not a bad thing. Don't take it as, okay, maybe I need to do something different. No, it's just going to happen. We have to be prepared for that. And we have to, like Von Oppen said, we have to keep going. Don't quit. If you truly believe in what you're doing and your message, I like to always lean back to, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it in the right way? Am I doing it for the right reason? If those answers are all three yes, then I don't have any other questions. I'm going to do what I feel is right. And so that's kind of something else I wanted to add to that. Do any of y'all have any kind of closing thoughts or anything else you want to add?
I got one thing,
yeah,
if I can, because I got to get off.
Yeah.
But at the very beginning, you said, is frustration going to be the beginning of the end, right, for you? And I would add to that, take your frustration and don't make it, the beginning of the end, because frustration can lead us down two paths, right? We can either decide to quit, or we can decide to fight through it, put our head down and work and not quit, right? So, make your frustration the end of the beginning. It starts with frustration, and take that frustration, take that energy and turn it into something else, and turn it into something good. Find like-minded people, go out there, take classes, adjust your message, but do not quit, keep going. So that's all I got. I got to run though. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Mark.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot today. And I actually stole a couple of notes. I got some good quotes that I'm gonna use going forward. The evolutionary versus revolutionary, and set the table for somebody else. I think that's good stuff. So thank you guys very much for having me be a part of this, but I got to run. All right.
Mark.
No problem. We'll see you.
Safe.
Thank you. But Jared or Mark, you got anything to close out with?
I can't think of anything, brother.
I got two things for you, Jeremy.
Yeah, go.
With the frustration, it kind of touches on what I just said about, a win's the win. A lot of what I see right now with people that are frustrated is they get so used to being rebellious that becomes their thing, right? And all these things with we're rogues and, all that stuff, like that's great. But it's a turnoff too, right? In a lot of ways for your message. So you have to recognize when progress is being made, and you got to learn. I don't want to say dial it back. That sounds wrong, right? But you can't just always be pissed off, right? Like if things are starting to improve, you can't just keep finding things to stay in that pissed off, rebellious attitude, right? It's good to be rebellious when it's necessary, but when the tides start to change, you got to kind of start helping guide that ship forward and change your attitude a little bit. Otherwise, you're just going to make other people frustrated, right? It's a perpetual cycle, and some people get off on that, right? That's their thing. It's always being pissed off. Yeah. And then finally, I think the most difficult part overall with frustration is that negativity is so much more contagious than positivity. And people say all the time, positivity breeds positivity, right? It does, but the time frame for it is so off, right? You could go literally walk in the fire station that's functioning great this morning and plant one negativity seed. By the morning, by the afternoon, everybody would be pissed off and disenfranchised. But if you go out there and set the example and do things right and make good changes, they're not going to come back to center as fast as they got away, right? So I think, understanding that and being realistic about your goals. And I think Mark had said a good thing, and I try to remind the guys all the time, right? Well, let's talk about 10 years ago in this fire department. What was going on? Oh, man, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, I guess it's really not that bad today, is it, right? Do we have, room to grow still? Absolutely, but you got to kind of look back. It took that long to get to where we are. Why would you think that all these other things going on are going to be fixed tomorrow? So just be realistic about it and understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a place that that I always want to be at, and it's a great place to kind of close it out on is, yeah, we're talking about frustration. We're talking about being upset and, some negative stuff, you can associate with negativity, but we're doing it in a way that we can turn it into positive. So yeah, it's a negative connotation type conversation, but I hope that everybody listening, and I for sure, I know that I got a lot out of it. I hope they take out of this that even though we are frustrated, even though that is a negative thing, we have so many positives that we can pull from that if we just do it, if we just do the work to get the best out of those situations, even if it's something that's not the best, if it's not what we want, whatever, we can pull great things out of that, and it can take us to places that we only dream of going if we just kind of listen to what our passions are telling us and follow that and just take the step to spread your message. So yeah, I appreciate that, staying positive and making the most out of it. So that's awesome. Anything further?
No, man, I appreciate having me on.
Yeah, that's
been
awesome.
fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've honestly been looking forward to this for a long time. I knew that it was going to be a good conversation. Like I said earlier, I needed to hear this right now, just specifically for me. So it was great. Really appreciate your time. And before I get off, I didn't have time for Mark to say anything about kind of how to reach him, but just looking social media, I know what he'd say is his Instagram is Fully Involved Official, and you can find him on Facebook at just the Fully Involved page. So that's the way you can find Mark Van Oppen. Both of you guys, any place where people can find you or reach out to you, or anything else you want to pitch before we go?
Same spots. Facebook's easy. You get a trial by fire. You can go to that page, or just my personal Jared Sergi. You can reach out to me on there. And then I have an Instagram page. I wish I could remember the handle, but I think it's TBF and then _ Jared Sergi. But if you search my name, it should pop up there. But that's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, mine's the Fire Inside page on Facebook. I try Instagram. I still don't think I understand it right after all these years, but I try real hard. I've tried to get away from, using my personal page for stuff like this, just because it's kind of overwhelming, and I'm trying to make that more for, family and stuff. So please don't get offended if you send me a friend request or something and I'm not answering. Just stick to the Fire Inside page on Facebook. I have a website. I'm trying to get some new t-shirts and stuff up before the holidays. So if you like Kool-Aid guys and stuff like that, check it out. It goes to a good cause, 20% to the next rung from everything I sell. So my shameless pitch going into holidays to sell a couple stickers and stuff. So.
Awesome. That's good stuff, man. I want to encourage anybody out there listening. I hope that there are a lot of people out there that are kind of where we were, just starting out, just kind of getting into figuring out there's a lot more out there than just me sitting at my station. I can make a difference outside of my walls. And so anybody that's in that area, or anybody that just kind of have lost some fire and want to get back into it, reach out to these pages. There's so many good fire pages out there, and on Facebook and Instagram, and these three are really some of the most important for me, in my journey, the three that I've really gotten the most out of. And so it's out there. You just got to kind of get out and look and find it. Get out to these conferences, get out and start networking and meet these people and let them help you on your journey, because there's so many people out there that want to help and make the fire service better. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your friendship, and looking forward to the next one. And until then, everybody stay humble and do work. Thank you.